The observation deck of the Galactic Combat Academy fell silent as the massive viewport revealed the training facility below. Commander Zethrak of the Corvani Empire adjusted his forearms nervously, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking against itself. Beside him stood representatives from 12 of the galaxy's most formidable warrior races, each having traveled vast distances to witness what many considered impossible. "Are you certain about this intelligence, Commander?" asked General Teochesis, her serpentine form coiled elegantly despite the tension in her voice. The Naga military leader had conquered 17 star systems through pure combat prowess, yet uncertainty flickered in her golden eyes. Zethrak's mandibles clicked in what passed for a grim smile among his species. "Our scouts have been monitoring this sector for 3 cycles now. The humans have agreed to demonstrate their training methods. What we've heard through intelligence channels seemed too extraordinary to believe." Below them, the training facility stretched across several kilometers of reinforced deck plating. Various gravity fields, environmental hazards, and combat scenarios could be generated within its confines. The technology represented the pinnacle of galactic engineering, designed to challenge even the most elite warriors from across known space. Ambassador Vorthan, a crystalline being whose species communicated through harmonic resonances, pulsed with curiosity. His translucent form shifted through various hues as he processed the implications. The reports suggest these humans possess capabilities that defy conventional understanding of biological limitations. How is this possible for such a young species? The question hung in the recycled air of the observation deck. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Federation mere decades ago, emerging from a small blue world in the Outer Rim territories. Their technology lagged behind most established civilizations by centuries. Their military forces numbered in the mere millions compared to the trillions fielded by major powers, and their physical attributes seemed unremarkable when measured against the galaxy's established warrior races. Yet something had changed in the past few years. Human mercenaries and soldiers had begun appearing in conflicts across the galaxy, often hired as specialists for impossible missions. The survival rates of operations involving human personnel had increased dramatically, and enemy casualties in engagements featuring human combatants had reached statistical anomalies that demanded investigation. Captain Drachnes, whose Ursoid species was renowned for their incredible strength and endurance, rumbled his confusion. Standing over 3 meters tall with muscle density that could crush durasteel, he represented the physical pinnacle of his race. "I have fought beside humans in the Kepler Nebula campaign. They are adequate warriors. Determined, certainly, but hardly exceptional. Their reflexes are slower than a Felinor's, their strength less than a Terex, their endurance inferior to my own people's capabilities." "That's exactly what makes this so intriguing," Zethrak replied, his compound eyes reflecting the lights from the facility below. "Every measurement we take suggests they should be unremarkable. Yet somehow, in actual combat situations, they consistently exceed all predictions." The delegation had assembled after a particularly disturbing report from the siege of Arcturus Station. A single human squad had held a strategic corridor against overwhelming odds for 72 hours, fighting off waves of hive warriors that should have overwhelmed them within minutes. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the humans still fighting, having eliminated over 300 enemies while sustaining minimal casualties themselves. Similar reports had filtered in from across the galaxy. Human exploration teams surviving in environments that killed members of supposedly hardier species. Human negotiators maintaining composure under psychic pressure that broke the minds of telepathically resistant races. Human engineers solving problems that had stumped the galaxy's greatest intellects for generations. The mystery had grown too significant to ignore, leading to this unprecedented gathering. Representatives from the Galactic Combat Academy, the Universal Military Institute, and the Confederation of Warrior Guilds had all agreed to observe whatever demonstration the humans were willing to provide. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The holographic display materialized, showing a human female in simple military fatigues. She appeared remarkably ordinary, average height by galactic standards, unremarkable muscle definition, no visible cybernetic enhancements or genetic modifications. "Greetings, honored delegates," she said, her voice carrying an undertone of confidence that seemed disproportionate to her appearance. "I'm Colonel Sarah Chun, instructor at the Human Military Training Institute. We appreciate your interest in our training methodologies." General THYSS leaned forward, her serpentine form creating elegant curves as she studied the human. "Colonel Chun, our intelligence reports suggest your species has developed training techniques that produce combat effectiveness far exceeding biological baselines. We would be most interested in observing these methods." "Of course," Chun replied with what humans called a smile. "I should warn you, however, that our training philosophy differs significantly from galactic standard approaches. What you're about to see might seem unconventional." The viewport below began to brighten as the facility's lighting systems activated. Slowly, figures became visible in the training area. Humans, dozens of them, wearing simple exercise clothing without any visible equipment or enhancement devices. Commander Zethrak's antennae twitched with confusion. "Where are the training mechanoids? The simulation equipment? The enhancement chambers?" "We don't use those," Chen explained. "Human training focuses on developing inherent capabilities rather than relying on external augmentation." The assembled delegates exchanged glances. Every advanced civilization used technological assistance to push their warriors beyond natural limits. Gravity multipliers to increase strength, neural interfaces to enhance reaction times, pharmacological supplements to extend endurance. The concept of training without such aids seemed primitive, almost barbaric. Below, the humans had begun their demonstration. They started with what appeared to be simple physical exercises, running, jumping, lifting crude weights made of basic metals. To the experienced military observers, it looked like the basic conditioning routines used by civilian fitness enthusiasts across the galaxy. "Forgive me, Colonel," Captain Drachnes rumbled, "but this appears to be elementary physical conditioning. How does this relate to the extraordinary combat performance we've documented?" Chen's expression didn't change. "Patience, Captain. Understanding human training requires observing the complete process. What you're seeing now is our foundation work, but the principles involved are more complex than they appear." As if responding to some unseen signal, the humans below began to increase their intensity. The running became faster, the jumping higher, the weights heavier. Yet there was something unsettling about the way they moved. Their faces showed strain, yes, but also a kind of fierce concentration that seemed to transcend mere physical effort. Ambassador Vorthan's crystalline form pulsed with different colors as he attempted to analyze what he was observing. Their biometric readings are unusual. Elevated stress hormones, increased neural activity, but the patterns don't match standard exercise physiology. "That's because they're not just exercising their bodies," Chen explained. "Human training integrates mental, emotional, and physical conditioning simultaneously. We don't separate these elements the way most species do." The concept was foreign to the assembled observers. Galactic military doctrine treated physical conditioning, mental training, and psychological preparation as distinct disciplines, each requiring specialized equipment and expert instruction. The idea that these could be combined in such basic exercises seemed impossible. Yet as they watched, something extraordinary began to happen. The humans below started pushing themselves beyond what should have been their physical limits. Weights that should have been impossible to lift were hoisted overhead. Running speeds that should have torn their muscles apart were maintained for extended periods. Jump heights that should have shattered their bones upon landing were achieved repeatedly. More disturbing was the way they encouraged each other. When one human began to falter, others would call out in their harsh, guttural language. Instead of accepting failure or allowing rest, they pushed harder, drawing strength from sources that shouldn't exist. General THYSS's golden eyes narrowed as she observed the training session. Their vital signs indicate they should be approaching organ failure. yet they continue to increase intensity. This violates everything we understand about biological limitations. Human physiology is more adaptable than most species realize, Chen responded. But the real key isn't in our bodies, it's in our minds. We train ourselves to ignore what our brains tell us is impossible. The statement sent ripples of confusion through the observation deck. Ignoring survival instincts was typically associated with mental illness or severe psychological conditioning. No healthy organism willingly pushed itself beyond the point where tissue damage became inevitable. Below, the demonstration had evolved into something more complex. The humans had formed small groups and were engaging in combat exercises without weapons or protective gear. They struck each other with full force, absorbed impacts that should have broken bones, and continued fighting even when blood began to flow. What horrified the observers most was that they seemed to be enjoying it. Commander Zethrak's exoskeleton rattled as involuntary stress responses activated. They're deliberately injuring themselves. This isn't training, it's ritualized violence. It's necessary, Chen replied matter-of-factly. Pain tolerance is crucial for combat effectiveness. Our warriors need to understand that injury doesn't equal incapacitation. The mind's response to damage is often more limiting than the damage itself. Captain Drachnes, despite his species' reputation for ferocity, found himself disturbed by the display. But the psychological trauma... How do you maintain unit cohesion when soldiers regularly inflict injury upon each other? It has the opposite effect, Chen explained. Shared hardship creates bonds stronger than any other force we've discovered. When humans fight beside those who've bled with them in training, surrender becomes literally unthinkable. The combat exercises continued with increasing intensity. Humans who should have been unconscious from their injuries continued fighting. Those who fell got back up and rejoined the combat. The facility's medical sensors registered damage levels that should have required immediate evacuation, yet the subjects showed no signs of stopping. Ambassador Vorthen's harmonic frequencies shifted to express profound confusion. The pain receptors are functioning normally, yet they show no behavioral response to injury. Have they been subjected to surgical modification? No modifications, Chun confirmed. This is the result of mental conditioning combined with what we call warrior culture. Our training teaches individuals to embrace discomfort rather than avoid it. The concept was alien to every species present. Galactic civilization had spent millennia developing technologies and techniques to minimize suffering and maximize comfort. The idea of deliberately seeking out pain and hardship ran counter to every evolutionary instinct they understood. Yet the results were undeniable. The humans below displayed physical capabilities that exceeded their biological baselines by enormous margins. More importantly, they showed psychological resilience that defied explanation. When conventional wisdom said they should quit, they pushed harder. When logic demanded retreat, they advanced. General THYSS coiled her serpentine form more tightly as she processed the implications. You're essentially training your warriors to ignore their own survival instincts. The mental discipline required for such conditioning must be extraordinary. It is, Chun agreed. Human military training isn't just about creating better soldiers. It's about creating better humans. We believe that voluntary exposure to adversity strengthens character in ways that comfort never can. The philosophy was simultaneously simple and profound. Every advanced civilization used technology to enhance their warriors' capabilities, but humans enhanced the warriors themselves. They didn't make their soldiers stronger, they made strong soldiers. As the demonstration continued, new elements were introduced. Environmental hazards activated throughout the facility, subjecting the humans to extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, and disorienting sensory input. Equipment that would challenge the galaxy's elite special forces was deployed against warriors who possessed no technological advantages. The humans adapted to each challenge with disturbing ease. When the temperature dropped to levels that should have induced hypothermia, they increased their physical activity to generate heat. When toxic gases filled the training area, they regulated their breathing and continued their exercises. When blinding lights and deafening sounds assaulted their senses, they learned to fight without sight or hearing. Most unsettling was their attitude throughout the ordeal. Where other species would have shown signs of stress, fear, or desperation, the humans exhibited what could only be described as grim satisfaction. They were enjoying the challenges, drawing strength from the very hardships that should have broken them. Captain Drachnes' massive form trembled slightly as he watched warriors half his size accomplish feats that would have challenged his species' champions. How do you recruit individuals willing to undergo such conditioning? Surely only the most exceptional members of your species could endure this training. Chen's response was perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. Actually, Captain, what you're observing is our standard conditioning program. Every human military recruit undergoes similar training. What makes it effective isn't that we start with exceptional individuals. It's that we create them through the process itself. The implication was staggering. These weren't elite warriors selected from billions of candidates and enhanced through cutting-edge technology. They were ordinary humans, transformed through nothing more than deliberate exposure to hardship and the cultivation of mental toughness. The observation deck fell silent as the full significance of what they were witnessing became clear. Humanity had discovered something that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had missed: the power of voluntary suffering to transcend biological limitations. Commander Zethrak's compound eyes reflected the harsh lighting from below as he watched humans accomplishing the impossible through sheer force of will. Colonel Chun, if this training methodology is so effective, why haven't other species adopted similar approaches? They have, Chun replied. Every species develops warriors through adversity, conflict, competition, struggle. The difference is that most civilizations try to minimize the hardship involved, using technology to make the process more efficient and comfortable. Humans embrace the hardship as essential to the outcome. The philosophical divide was stark. Galactic civilization viewed suffering as a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be overcome through superior technology and methodology. Humans viewed suffering as a tool to be wielded, a forge in which strength was created rather than merely revealed. Below, the demonstration had reached levels that defied rational explanation. Humans were accomplishing feats that violated known limits of their species' physiology. They lifted weights that should have crushed their bones, endured impacts that should have rendered them unconscious, and maintained focus under conditions that should have induced psychological breakdown. Yet perhaps most remarkable was their evident camaraderie throughout the ordeal. They supported each other through the most brutal challenges, shared the burden of impossible tasks, and celebrated each other's achievements even as they pushed themselves to the brink of collapse. General THYSS observed the teamwork with professional appreciation. Their unit cohesion is remarkable. The bonds formed through shared adversity appear stronger than those created through traditional military brotherhood programs. Shared suffering creates trust that can't be replicated any other way, Chen explained. When humans know their comrades have endured the same trials, have pushed through the same barriers, have chosen to embrace the same hardships, that knowledge creates unbreakable bonds. The training session below was beginning to wind down, but the humans showed no signs of exhaustion or relief. Instead, they seemed energized by what they had accomplished, ready to begin again if necessary. Their faces showed satisfaction, pride, and an eager anticipation that suggested they were already looking forward to the next challenge. Ambassador Vorthan's crystalline form had shifted to deep purple hues as he processed the day's observations. Colonel Chun, the implications of what we've witnessed extend far beyond military applications. If humans can transcend biological limitations through mental conditioning alone, what other capabilities might your species develop? Chen's smile carried undertones that made several observers uncomfortable. That's an excellent question, Ambassador. Perhaps we should discuss that possibility when your people are ready for more advanced demonstrations. The statement hung in the air like a challenge, suggesting that what they had witnessed was merely the beginning of human capabilities. The assembled delegates had come expecting to observe interesting training techniques. Instead, they had discovered that humanity possessed a fundamental advantage that no technology could replicate: the willingness to forge strength through voluntary adversity. As the observation session concluded and the various representatives prepared to return to their respective governments, each carried with them the disturbing realization that the galaxy's newest member species might also be its most dangerous. Not because of superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but because they had learned to transform weakness into strength through the simple expedient of refusing to accept limitations. The humans had revealed something profound about the nature of strength itself. It was not an inherent trait to be measured and compared, but a quality to be developed through deliberate choice and persistent effort. They had weaponized the very concept of growth, turning their training facilities into forges where ordinary beings were transformed into something more through nothing more complex than structured hardship and unbreakable will. In the depths of space, as various ships departed the Human Military Training Institute, communication channels buzzed with urgent reports to home governments. The galaxy's power structure had just encountered its first glimpse of humanity's true potential, and the implications were too significant to ignore. Humanity had not simply joined the galactic community. They had introduced a completely new paradigm for what sentient beings could become. The age of technological enhancement and genetic optimization was encountering the age of voluntary transformation through adversity, and the outcome of that meeting would reshape the galaxy's understanding of strength itself 3 months after the initial observation. Urgent transmissions crackled across subspace networks, linking the major powers of the galactic community. The reports from the Human Military Training Institute had triggered responses ranging from curiosity to outright alarm among the galaxy's military establishments. Supreme Admiral Corvin of the Draconian Fleet paced the length of his command bridge, his scaled hide reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The holographic display before him showed tactical analyses from 17 different military intelligence agencies, all reaching the same disturbing conclusion. Human combat effectiveness continued to increase at rates that defied conventional understanding. "Show me the Vegas sector engagement again," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of centuries spent commanding the galaxy's most feared fleet. The tactical hologram shifted, displaying a three-dimensional representation of a recent pirate suppression operation. A single human frigate, the UES Determination, had encountered a raiding fleet of 8 vessels operated by Corlic pirates. By every tactical calculation, the humans should have retreated immediately or been destroyed within minutes. Instead, something extraordinary had occurred. The human vessel had not only stood and fought against overwhelming odds, but had systematically disabled or destroyed 6 of the 8 enemy ships before the remainder fled. Combat recordings showed human crew members continuing to operate their stations even while suffering injuries that should have rendered them unconscious. Damage reports indicated the frigate had sustained hits that should have crippled its systems, yet somehow remained operational throughout the engagement. "Their casualties, Admiral?" asked Commander Thale, Corvin's aide-de-camp. "3 injured, none killed," Corvin replied grimly. Against a force that should have annihilated them completely. The implications were staggering. The Corlic pirates were renowned for their savagery and effectiveness in combat. Their vessels were heavily armed, their crews experienced in violence, their tactics proven against numerous galactic powers. Yet they had been defeated by a human crew operating a technologically inferior vessel. Similar reports had filtered in from across the galaxy. Human merchant marines fighting off syndicate raiders with improvised weapons. Human exploration teams surviving encounters with hostile alien environments that had claimed the lives of far better equipped expeditions. Human diplomatic missions maintaining composure under psychic attacks, that had broken seasoned negotiators from telepathically resistant species. The pattern was undeniable. Humans were consistently outperforming expectations by margins that suggested either systematic intelligence failures or a fundamental misunderstanding of human capabilities. Admiral Corvin's contemplation was interrupted by an incoming priority transmission from the Galactic Defense Council. The holographic image materialized, showing Director Yeska of the Zentorian Administrative Corps, her insectoid features unusually agitated. Admiral Corvin, we've received a formal request from the Human Federation for a joint training exercise. They've proposed a standard combat scenario pitting their forces against volunteers from member species. The Admiral's membranes flared in what passed for surprise among his people. That's remarkably bold for such a young species. What are the proposed parameters? Small unit engagement, mixed terrain, limited technological support. Yes, Ka replied. They've specifically requested that participating forces use only standard-issue equipment to ensure fair comparison of tactical doctrines. Corvin considered the implications. A formal demonstration would either validate the growing reports of human combat prowess or expose them as exaggerated rumors. Either outcome would provide valuable intelligence about this increasingly concerning species. Who's volunteering to participate? That's the interesting part, Yeska continued. We've received applications from elite units across the galaxy. The Corvani Death Guards, the Naga Strike Teams, the Feliner Hunter Packs. Apparently, word of human capabilities has spread far enough to intrigue our most accomplished warriors. The fact that the galaxy's premier military units were volunteering for what amounted to a demonstration spoke volumes about how seriously the military establishment was taking the human phenomenon. These were not units known for curiosity or casual participation in academic exercises. 2 weeks later, the joint training exercise commenced on Kepler 442b, a planet specifically selected for its diverse and challenging terrain. The world featured dense forests, mountainous regions, desert wastelands, and urban environments, all designed to test various aspects of tactical doctrine and combat effectiveness. Observing from orbital platforms, military analysts from dozens of species monitor the exercise through advanced sensor arrays. The human contingent consisted of 200 Marines drawn from their standard forces, not elite units, but regular troops with typical training and equipment. Opposing them were 50 warriors representing the finest combat specialists the galaxy had to offer. Each alien participant was equipped with their species' standard military gear and had been selected for exceptional skill and experience. The force included members of species renowned across the galaxy for their combat prowess. The scenario was straightforward. The alien force would attempt to secure a series of strategic objectives while the human force defended them. The engagement would be conducted with non-lethal weapons that simulated actual combat conditions without permanent injury. As the exercise began, initial observations seemed to confirm conventional expectations. The alien forces advanced with professional precision, utilizing superior technology and proven tactical doctrines. Their movements were coordinated, their equipment functioned flawlessly, and their approach demonstrated centuries of military evolution. The human defenders took positions throughout the terrain, apparently following standard defensive protocols. Their equipment appeared crude by galactic standards: simple projectile weapons, basic communication devices, primitive armor systems. Their formations seemed unremarkable, their positions conventional. Yet something began to go wrong with the alien assault almost immediately. The first indication of trouble came when the Corvani Death Guards, elite warriors whose species possessed natural armor and enhanced strength, encountered human positions in the forested terrain. The initial engagement should have been brief. The Corvani advantages in firepower and protection should have overwhelmed the human defensive positions within minutes. Instead, the attack bogged down almost immediately. The humans fought from positions that seemed impossible to maintain, absorbed casualties that should have broken their resistance, and counterattacked with ferocity that caught the advancing aliens completely off guard. Commander Zexkai, leading the Death Guard advance, found himself pinned down behind cover that was being systematically destroyed by human fire. His tactical display showed that his unit was taking acceptable casualties, but somehow the enemy fire was not only continuing, but actually intensifying. "How many humans are in that position?" he asked his sensor operator. "4, Commander. Possibly 5. Zexkai checked his own casualty reports. His unit of 12 elite warriors was being held up by less than half their number of humans using inferior weapons. The mathematics made no sense. What made even less sense was the human behavior. Standard tactical doctrine dictated that defenders should withdraw when their positions became untenable. The humans not only refused to withdraw, but seemed to become more aggressive as their situation deteriorated. Similar problems developed across the entire battlefront. The Naga strike teams, renowned for their speed and coordination, found themselves unable to outmaneuver human units that should have been far slower and clumsier. The Feliner Hunter packs, whose species possessed enhanced senses and reflexes, were being outgunned by humans who somehow anticipated their movements despite inferior sensory capabilities. Most disturbing was the human response to casualties. When alien forces managed to eliminate human defenders, the expected result, reduced defensive capability, failed to materialize. Instead, the remaining humans seemed to fight harder, as if the loss of comrades somehow increased rather than decreased their effectiveness. Dr. Violent Kors, the Altarian psychologist monitoring the exercise, observed the phenomenon with growing alarm. "The human stress response is completely atypical," she reported to the observation team. "Normal psychology predicts that casualties should reduce unit effectiveness through fear, demoralization, and tactical disruption. These humans show the opposite pattern." The observation was confirmed by biometric readings from the human participants. Instead of the expected stress responses to combat and casualties, the humans showed elevated but stable physiological indicators that suggested heightened performance rather than degraded capability. As the exercise continued, the alien assault began to stall completely. Forces that should have achieved their objectives within hours found themselves making no progress against defenders who refused to behave according to established tactical principles. The humans didn't just fight harder when pressed, they seemed to grow stronger. When their ammunition ran low, they fought more efficiently. When their communications were disrupted, their coordination actually improved. When their positions became untenable, they abandoned conventional defensive doctrine entirely and began launching counterattacks that caught their attackers completely unprepared. Captain Thos of the Ursoid Heavy Infantry, whose species was considered among the galaxy's finest assault troops, found himself in the unprecedented position of requesting tactical support against defenders who should have been overwhelmed hours earlier. "Orbital Command, we're encountering unexpected resistance at Objective Alpha 7. He reported, his massive form crouched behind inadequate cover as human fire continued to pour down from positions that should have been silenced long ago. "Explain the nature of your difficulties, Captain," came the response from Admiral Corvin, who was monitoring the exercise personally. "Sir, the human defensive positions appear to be regenerating themselves. We eliminate defenders, secure positions, then find ourselves under attack from the same locations minutes later. Our tactical computers show we've cleared these areas multiple times." The report was confirmed by sensor readings that defied explanation. Human casualties were being recorded accurately, positions were being overrun according to standard tactical parameters, yet somehow the defensive network continued to function at full effectiveness. What the orbital observers were witnessing was something unprecedented in galactic military history. A force that became more effective as it sustained damage, more coordinated as it lost communications, and more dangerous as its situation became more desperate. Dr. Kors studied the psychological profiles with increasing bewilderment. They're not just refusing to break under pressure. They're using the pressure to enhance their performance. It's as if their species has evolved to derive strength from adversity itself. The revelation sent shock waves through the observation teams. Every known species showed predictable degradation under stress. Combat effectiveness decreased as casualties mounted. Coordination suffered when communications failed. Morale collapsed when situations became hopeless. These were universal constants that governed military planning throughout the galaxy. Humans apparently operated under completely different rules. As the exercise entered its second day, the situation had reversed entirely. The assault force found itself on the defensive, trying to maintain positions against human counterattacks that seemed to come from everywhere simultaneously. Warriors who had never experienced tactical failure were being outfought by opponents they should have easily overcome. The breaking point came when the human forces, having somehow regrouped despite being scattered and depleted, launched a coordinated assault against the alien command post. The attack should have been impossible. The humans lacked the numbers, the equipment, and the tactical position necessary for such an operation. Yet it succeeded with devastating efficiency. The human assault teams moved through defensive positions that should have stopped them, eliminated guards who should have detected them, and captured objectives that should have been impregnable. They accomplished this not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through a combination of determination, adaptability, and sheer refusal to accept limitations. When the exercise officially ended, the statistical analysis revealed results that would reshape galactic military thinking for generations to come. The human force, despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and technologically disadvantaged, had not only successfully defended their objectives, but had effectively defeated the attacking force. More disturbing was the manner of their victory. Standard military doctrine emphasized minimizing casualties, preserving equipment, and achieving objectives through efficient application of force. The humans had won by accepting casualties, improvising with damaged equipment, and achieving objectives through persistence rather than efficiency. Admiral Corvin studied the after-action reports in his private quarters, his scaled features reflecting the light of the star charts surrounding his desk. The implications of what he had witnessed extended far beyond simple military tactics. Every galactic civilization had reached the same conclusion. Strength came from enhancing natural capabilities through technology, organization, and superior resources. The humans had demonstrated that strength could also come from maximizing the potential of existing capabilities through training, determination, and what could only be described as philosophical commitment to overcoming obstacles. The difference was profound. Enhanced capabilities could be measured, predicted, and countered through superior enhancement. Maximized potential was limited only by the individual's willingness to push beyond perceived boundaries, and humans seemed to have no such boundaries. A communication alert interrupted his contemplation. The message was from the Human Federation's military liaison, Colonel Chun, requesting a private meeting to discuss expanded cooperation opportunities. Admiral Corvin accepted the meeting with a mixture of professional curiosity and personal unease. He had commanded fleets that could sterilize entire star systems, but something about the humans' quiet confidence suggested they viewed such raw power as merely another obstacle to be overcome rather than an insurmountable threat. When Colonel Chun appeared in holographic form, her expression carried the same understated confidence that had characterized human behavior throughout the exercise. Admiral Corvin, thank you for participating in our joint training program. I trust the experience was educational. Educational is one word for it, Corvin replied carefully. Your forces performed unexpectedly well. They performed exactly as expected, Admiral. What you witnessed was the result of standard human military conditioning applied under realistic circumstances. Nothing more, nothing less. The casual dismissal of achievements that had shocked the galaxy's military establishment was perhaps more unsettling than the achievements themselves. Either Chun was engaging in psychological manipulation, or humans genuinely viewed their extraordinary performance as routine. Colonel, I must ask directly, what is the source of your species' apparent immunity to standard tactical limitations? Chen's smile suggested she had been expecting the question. We're not immune to limitations, Admiral. We simply refuse to accept that limitations define our capabilities. When you believe your strength determines what you can accomplish, you become limited by your current strength. When you believe your accomplishments can increase your strength, you become limited only by your willingness to grow. The philosophical distinction was subtle but profound. It suggested that humans viewed challenges not as obstacles to be overcome, but as opportunities for development. They didn't fight to win. They fought to become stronger, with victory being merely a byproduct of that growth. Admiral Corvin found himself contemplating concepts that his species had never seriously considered. The Draconians had built their civilization on the principle of accumulating power to overcome opposition. Humans seemed to build theirs on the principle of developing strength to transcend opposition. Were these expanded cooperation opportunities you mentioned? He asked. We believe human training methodologies could benefit other species, Chen replied. Not just military applications, but civilian development as well. We'd be interested in establishing exchange programs, joint ventures, collaborative research initiatives. The offer was simultaneously attractive and terrifying. The advantages of human training methods were undeniable, but adopting them would require fundamental changes to species that had evolved to avoid rather than embrace hardship. I'll relay your proposal to the appropriate authorities, Corvin said diplomatically. Of course, but, Admiral, you might want to include a personal recommendation in your report. The statement carried undertones that made Corvin's dorsal ridges stiffen involuntarily. Why is that? Because the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place, Chen replied with that uniquely human smile. The species that learn to adapt will thrive. Those that don't. She left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Humanity had introduced a new paradigm for strength development, and the rest of the galaxy would need to either embrace that paradigm or find themselves increasingly irrelevant in a universe where determination could overcome technological advantage. As the communication ended, Admiral Corvin sat in the silence of his command quarters, contemplating the most significant strategic development in galactic history. The humans had not simply demonstrated superior training methods. They had revealed that the foundation of galactic civilization's approach to strength and conflict was fundamentally flawed. The age of technological superiority was giving way to the age of developed potential, and the species that recognized this transition earliest would determine the galaxy's future power structure. The humans had given their competitors a glimpse of that future, but they had also demonstrated that merely observing their methods was insufficient. To compete with humans, other species would need to become something they had never been before, willing to embrace hardship as a path to growth rather than comfort as a reward for achievement. The galaxy's strongest fighters had indeed fallen silent watching humans train, but their silence was not one of admiration. It was the silence of warriors realizing that everything they thought they knew about strength was about to be proven obsolete. The emergency session of the Galactic Military Council convened aboard the Nexus Station, the massive space facility that served as neutral ground for the galaxy's major powers. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the council chambers, their varied forms creating a tapestry of evolutionary diversity that normally spoke to the strength of galactic civilization. Today, however, that diversity seemed less like strength and more like vulnerability. Fleet Admiral Quintus of the Terran Confederate Navy stood before the assembled delegates, her presence commanding attention despite being among the physically smallest beings in the room. Behind her, holographic displays showed tactical analyses, casualty reports, and strategic assessments that painted a picture of unprecedented change sweeping across known space. The situation has evolved beyond our initial projections, she began, her voice carrying across the chamber with quiet authority. What began as curiosity about human training methods has become a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. The statement drew murmurs of concern from the assembled representatives. 6 months had passed since the joint training exercise that had demonstrated human combat capabilities, and the consequences of that demonstration were becoming increasingly apparent. General Mordak of the Corvan Supremacy leaned forward in his biomechanical support cradle, his cybernetic enhancements glowing with agitation. Admiral Quintus, our intelligence reports suggest human mercenary units are being recruited across the galaxy at unprecedented rates. Their success percentages are destroying established military contracting markets. That's correct, Quintus confirmed. Human military specialists are achieving mission success rates approaching 97%, compared to galactic averages of 62%. More significantly, they're accomplishing these missions with casualty rates 1/10 of industry standards. The statistics were staggering, but they represented only the surface of a much deeper transformation. Human military contractors weren't just succeeding at difficult missions. They were redefining what was considered possible for military operations. Ambassador Veltash of the Andorian Collective raised one of her crystalline appendages for recognition. The economic implications extend far beyond military contracting. Human-trained security forces are being recruited by major corporations throughout the galaxy. Their effectiveness is forcing competitors to either hire human trainers or face obsolescence. The economic disruption was indeed significant, but it was merely a symptom of the larger phenomenon. Human training methodologies were beginning to spread throughout galactic society, carried by individuals who had experienced their effectiveness firsthand. Captain Thorek of the Ursoid Heavy Guard rumbled his confusion. I've observed these training programs personally. The physical conditioning appears primitive, the equipment basic, the methodology crude. Yet somehow, species that adopt human techniques show dramatic improvements in performance across multiple metrics. Dr. Ilan Soros, the galaxy's leading expert on comparative psychology, activated her holographic presentation. The display showed neurological scans, psychological profiles, and behavioral analyses comparing individuals before and after exposure to human training methods. The changes are not merely physical, she explained. Human training techniques appear to rewire neural pathways associated with stress response, pain tolerance, and goal persistence. Subjects show increased activity in brain regions linked to determination, while showing decreased activation of fear and avoidance centers. The implications were profound. Human training wasn't just making individuals stronger or more skilled. It was fundamentally altering their psychological makeup, creating beings who approach challenges with completely different mental frameworks. Most remarkably, Dr. Soros continued, these changes appear to be permanent. Even after formal training ends, subjects maintain the altered neural patterns and continue to demonstrate enhanced performance under stress. Admiral Corvan of the Draconian Fleet shifted his massive form in his command throne. Doctor, are you suggesting that human training methods constitute a form of psychological modification? Not exactly modification, Dr. Soros replied carefully. More accurately, it's psychological evolution. Human techniques don't change what beings are. They reveal what beings can become. The distinction was crucial. Psychological modification implied external alteration of natural states, which raised ethical concerns throughout the galaxy. Psychological evolution suggested the unlocking of inherent potential, which was both more acceptable and more disturbing. If Dr. Soros was correct, it meant that every species in the galaxy possessed capabilities they had never accessed, potential they had never developed, strength they had never imagined possible. Fleet Captain Zealand of the Regellian Defense Force activated his own presentation, showing deployment records from the past 6 months. Our forces have encountered human-trained units in 17 separate engagements. In every case, our tactical computers projected easy victories based on force comparison analysis. In every case, we achieved tactical objectives only after sustaining casualties significantly higher than predicted. Define significantly higher, requested Admiral Quintus with professional interest. Average casualty rates increased by 340% when facing human-trained opponents, Zealand replied grimly. Our tactical doctrines appear to be fundamentally inadequate against enemies who refuse to behave according to established military principles. The admission sent ripples of concern throughout the chamber. The Regelian Defense Force was considered among the galaxy's most professional military organizations, with tactical doctrines refined through centuries of successful conflicts. If their methods were proving inadequate against human-trained forces, the implications extended far beyond simple military disadvantage. Commander Yeska of the Zentorian Administrative Corps added her own disturbing intelligence. We've documented cases of human trainers working with civilian populations on frontier worlds. Mining colonies are achieving extraction rates 30% above projected maximums. Agricultural settlements are producing crops in conditions previously considered impossible. Construction projects are being completed ahead of schedule despite working in hostile environments. The revelation that human methods were proving effective in civilian applications was perhaps more significant than their military success. Military effectiveness could be attributed to specialized combat training, but civilian applications suggested that human techniques addressed fundamental aspects of performance and capability that transcended specific fields. How are they doing this? Demanded General Mordak. Our analysis teams have observed human training sessions. We've documented their techniques, replicated their methods, analyzed their equipment. Yet when we attempt to implement similar programs with our own forces, the results are marginal at best. Admiral Quintus exchanged glances with several other human representatives before responding. General, you're focusing on the wrong variables. Human training effectiveness doesn't come from techniques or methods. It comes from philosophy. Philosophy? Ambassador Veltash's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. You're suggesting that abstract concepts produce measurable physical results? Not abstract concepts, Quintus clarified. Fundamental beliefs about the relationship between challenge and growth. Most species view obstacles as problems to be solved through superior resources or technology. Humans view obstacles as opportunities to develop superior capabilities. The philosophical distinction was subtle but profound. It suggested that human effectiveness came not from what they did, but from how they thought about what they were doing. Dr. Soros nodded in agreement. Our psychological analyses confirm Admiral Quintus's assessment. Human training doesn't just condition bodies and minds, it conditions beliefs about possibility and limitation. Subjects learn to view their current capabilities as starting points rather than definitions. Captain Thorek rumbled thoughtfully. You're saying that the key to human effectiveness is their refusal to accept that current limitations are permanent limitations. Exactly, Quintus confirmed. When you believe your strength today determines what you can accomplish tomorrow, you become trapped by your present capabilities. When you believe your efforts today can increase your strength tomorrow, you become limited only by your willingness to maintain effort. The explanation was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. If human effectiveness truly stemmed from philosophical approach rather than specific techniques, then adopting their methods would require fundamental changes to species' entire cultural outlook. Commander Zexkai of the Corvani Death Guards, who had personally experienced human combat effectiveness during the joint training exercise, spoke up. Admiral Quintus, if human superiority comes from philosophy rather than technique, why share this information with us? Surely keeping such advantages secret would serve your species' interests. The question was astute and represented the thoughts of many delegates. Military advantage was typically guarded jealously, shared only with close allies, and only under carefully controlled circumstances. Quintus's response was characteristically direct. Commander, because philosophical advantages can't be hoarded like technological secrets. The more beings who understand and apply these principles, the stronger the galaxy becomes as a whole. Human security is enhanced by galactic stability, not by maintaining artificial advantages over our neighbors. The statement reflected a strategic thinking that was as foreign to most species as human training methods themselves. Most civilizations viewed power as a zero-sum game, where one group's advantage necessarily came at the expense of another's disadvantage. Humans apparently viewed power as something that could be increased for everyone simultaneously, creating mutual benefit rather than competitive advantage. Fleet Admiral Yaren of the Tau Ceti Defense Consortium raised a concern that had been troubling military planners throughout the galaxy. Admiral, if these human methods become widespread, how will this affect galactic military balance? Will we see an arms race in training techniques rather than technology? That's already happening, Quintus replied. But it's not an arms race in the traditional sense. Traditional arms races involve competing to develop superior weapons or defenses. This development involves competing to become superior warriors and citizens. The distinction was crucial. Technological arms races typically favored wealthy civilizations with advanced research capabilities and manufacturing infrastructure. A development race based on training and philosophy could theoretically involve any species willing to embrace the necessary changes. Dr. Soros activated additional data displays showing the spreading influence of human training methods throughout the galaxy. We're documenting adoption of human techniques across 43 different species and over 2,000 separate organizations. The rate of spread is accelerating exponentially. What's driving the acceleration? Asked Ambassador Veltash. Success breeds adoption, Dr. Soros explained. When beings observe the effectiveness of human-trained individuals, they naturally want to understand and replicate those results. But the process creates a multiplier effect. Each newly trained individual becomes a demonstration of the methodology's effectiveness, inspiring others to seek similar training. The phenomenon described was a classic positive feedback loop, but applied to personal development rather than technology or economics. As more individuals demonstrated enhanced capabilities through human training methods, demand for such training increased, which produced more enhanced individuals, which further increased demand. Captain Thorek contemplated the implications with growing unease. Doctor, you're describing a transformation that could fundamentally alter galactic civilization. If these methods become universal, what happens to species whose traditional cultures are incompatible with human philosophy? The question touched on one of the most troubling aspects of a human phenomenon. Species that had evolved to value comfort, efficiency, and technological solutions might find themselves unable to compete with species that embraced hardship, persistence, and personal development. Admiral Quintus addressed the concern directly. Captain, human methods don't require abandoning traditional cultures. They require expanding them to include concepts of growth through challenge. Every species can adapt these principles to their own cultural contexts. But adaptation requires change, observed General Mordak. And change always involves risk of losing essential cultural elements. True, Quintus acknowledged. But the alternative is accepting obsolescence. The galaxy is changing whether we participate in that change or not. The question is whether we guide the transformation or allow it to happen without our input. The strategic reality was stark. Human training methods were spreading throughout the galaxy regardless of official approval or disapproval from governmental authorities. The only choice facing established powers was whether to embrace, resist, or attempt to control that spread. Fleet Captain Zealand posed a question that was troubling many military leaders. Admiral, if we establish formal training exchanges with human instructors, what guarantees do we have that our forces won't become loyal to human interests rather than their home governments? The concern about loyalty was legitimate. Military training traditionally emphasized loyalty to specific organizations, governments, or causes. Human training seemed to emphasize loyalty to principles that transcended national or species boundaries. You have the same guarantee that humans have, Quintus replied. Training develops character, determination, and capability, but it doesn't dictate how those qualities are applied. A human-trained warrior remains loyal to their chosen cause. They just become more effective at serving that cause. But what if their chosen cause changes as a result of their training? Pressed Captain Zealand. Then, they become better at serving their new chosen cause. Quintus answered with characteristic directness. Human training develops thinking beings, not mindless automatons. Thinking beings sometimes change their minds about important issues. The admission was both reassuring and disturbing. It suggested that human training methods didn't create blind loyalty, but it also implied that exposure to human philosophy might lead individuals to question their existing loyalties and commitments. Commander Yeska raised another practical concern. Admiral, our preliminary attempts to implement human training methods have met with limited success. Our instructors understand the techniques, but lack the philosophical foundation to make them effective. How do we bridge that gap? Through experience rather than explanation, Quintus replied. Human philosophy can't be learned intellectually. It must be lived practically. Your instructors need to undergo the training themselves before they can effectively teach others. The suggestion was logical but problematic. Most military establishments prefer to maintain clear distinctions between instructors and students, with experienced personnel teaching less experienced ones. Human methods seem to require that teachers continuously challenge themselves alongside their students. Dr. Soros supported Admiral Quintus's assessment with psychological data. Our research confirms that human training effectiveness correlates directly with the instructor's personal commitment to the philosophy. Beings who teach human methods without embracing human beliefs produce minimal results. The requirement for philosophical commitment created significant challenges for military organizations that valued predictability and standardization. Traditional training could be implemented through established procedures regardless of the instructor's personal beliefs. Human training required authentic engagement with concepts that challenged fundamental assumptions about capability and limitation. As the session continued, it became clear that the human phenomenon represented more than a military development or training innovation. It was a civilizational transformation that would ultimately require every species to either evolve or risk becoming irrelevant in a galaxy where determination could overcome technological advantage. Admiral Quintus concluded her presentation with a statement that would be quoted in strategic analyses for decades to come. The choice facing the galaxy is not whether to adopt human methods or maintain traditional approaches. The choice is whether to grow or to be surpassed by those who choose growth. The silence that followed her words was not the silence of contemplation, but of species beginning to understand that the age of comfort and technological superiority was ending, replaced by an age where strength would be determined by willingness to embrace challenge and transcend limitation. The galaxy's strongest fighters had fallen silent, not just because they were impressed by human training methods, but because they were beginning to realize that strength itself was being redefined, and those who failed to understand the new definition would find themselves strong in capabilities that no longer mattered. 2 years had passed since the revelation of human training methodologies sent shock waves throughout galactic civilization. The changes that followed were both profound and unexpected, transforming not just military doctrine, but the fundamental structure of interspecies relations. On the agricultural world of New Kepler, a remarkable experiment was taking place that would reshape understanding of what was possible when human philosophy met alien determination. The planet had been settled by the Tharaki, a peaceful herbivorous species known throughout the galaxy for their scholarly pursuits and philosophical contemplation. The Tharaki had never been considered warriors. Their slender frames, gentle disposition, and preference for intellectual over physical pursuits had made them natural academics, diplomats, and researchers. Their military consisted primarily of defensive technologies and passive deterrence, as their culture viewed violence as an unfortunate necessity rather than a skill to be mastered. Yet something extraordinary was happening in the training facilities that had been constructed across New Kepler surface. Colonel Sarah Chun stood at the observation platform overlooking Training Complex Alpha, watching as 200 Tharaki volunteers engaged in exercises that would have seemed impossible mere months earlier. The graceful beings were performing combat drills with an intensity that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about their species. Beside her, Dr. Theron Ko, the Tharaki philosopher who served as the planet's cultural liaison, observed his people with a mixture of pride and amazement. I must confess, Colonel Chun, that even I doubted whether our species could adapt to human training methods. Our entire civilization is built around the principle of avoiding unnecessary hardship. That's exactly what makes this so remarkable, Chin replied, her attention focused on a group of Tharaki who were engaged in what humans called obstacle course training. Your people aren't abandoning their values. They're discovering that growth through challenge actually enhances their ability to live according to those values. The observation was accurate. The Tharaki volunteers weren't becoming more violent or aggressive. Instead, they were becoming more capable, more confident, and more effective at achieving their goals. Their scholarly pursuits were enhanced by improved focus and determination. Their diplomatic efforts were strengthened by increased mental resilience and stress tolerance. Dr. Theron Ko watched as one of his colleagues, an elderly philosopher named Varen Su, completed a physical challenge that would have been considered impossible for his species. How do you explain this transformation? Varen Su is over 150 cycles old, well past what we consider the peak of physical capability. Age is often more of a mental limitation than a physical one, Chin explained. Human training teaches beings to expand their definition of what's possible rather than accepting arbitrary boundaries based on conventional wisdom. The principle was demonstrated throughout the training complex. Tharaki who had never engaged in physical activity were accomplishing feats that challenged the physical capabilities of supposedly superior warrior species. More importantly, they were doing so while maintaining their essential character traits of thoughtfulness, compassion, and intellectual curiosity. The transformation hadn't been easy. Initial attempts to implement human training methods had met with significant resistance from Tharaki society. Many viewed the emphasis on physical hardship as contrary to their evolved nature, while others worried that military training would corrupt their peaceful culture. The breakthrough had come when human instructors modified their approach to align with Tharaki values. Instead of emphasizing combat effectiveness, they focused on personal development. Instead of promoting aggression, they emphasized controlled strength. Instead of glorifying violence, they demonstrated how physical capability could serve peaceful purposes. The results had exceeded everyone's expectations, including the humans who designed the program. Dr. Villenma, the Tharaki scientist leading the physiological studies, approached the observation platform with data tablets displaying the latest research findings. Colonel Chun, our analysis of the training participants continues to show results that challenge established scientific understanding. What have you discovered? Chen asked, though her expression suggested she already suspected what the data would reveal. Muscle density increases of 40%, cardiovascular efficiency improvements of 60%, neural processing speed enhancements of 25%, Dr. Villamar cited. These improvements are occurring in beings who were previously considered to be at their physiological peak or declining. The statistics were remarkable, but they represented only the quantifiable aspects of the transformation. The qualitative changes were even more significant. More intriguingly, Dr. Villamar continued, we're observing psychological changes that appear to enhance rather than diminish the traits our species values most. Participants show increased empathy, enhanced problem-solving abilities, and greater emotional stability. The discovery was revolutionary. Most galactic species had assumed that military-style training would necessarily compromise the qualities they valued in their cultures. The Tharaki experience demonstrated that human methods could actually strengthen those qualities while developing entirely new capabilities. Dr. Therenko examined the data with the careful attention that characterized the species' approach to new information. These results suggest that the dichotomy we've always assumed between physical development and intellectual growth is false. Human training appears to enhance both simultaneously. That's because humans don't separate mental and physical development, Chen explained. We view them as aspects of the same process. A strong mind supports a strong body, and a strong body supports a strong mind. The holistic approach was foreign to most galactic species, who typically specialized in either physical or mental development based on their evolutionary advantages. Humans had discovered that such specialization was not only unnecessary, but actually limiting. The discussion was interrupted by an alert from the training complex's communication center. An incoming transmission was being received from the Galactic Defense Council, marked with priority indicators that suggested urgent news. The holographic display materialized, showing Admiral Corvin of the Draconian Fleet. His scaled features carried an expression of concern that immediately commanded attention. Colonel Chun, Dr. Therenko, I'm transmitting intelligence reports that require immediate attention. We've encountered a situation that may test your training program under actual combat conditions. The transmission shifted to display tactical information showing star charts of the border regions near New Kepler. Red indicators marked the positions of hostile forces moving toward Tharaki space. The hegemony of Sark has declared the Tharaki territories to be inefficiently utilized resources, Admiral Corvin continued. They're advancing with a conquest fleet designed to claim your agricultural worlds for their own expansion. The news was devastating, but not entirely unexpected. The hegemony of Sark was one of the galaxy's most aggressive militaristic civilizations, known for conquering weaker species and absorbing their territories into their expanding empire. The Tharaki had long been considered a potential target due to their peaceful nature and valuable agricultural worlds. Dr. Therenko's expression reflected the calm acceptance that characterized the species' response to crisis. Admiral Corvin, our defensive capabilities are limited. We have always relied on diplomatic solutions and the protection of our allies for security. Your allies are committed to providing support, Admiral Corvin assured him. However, the hegemony forces will arrive within 2 weeks, and our nearest military units are at least 3 weeks away. You'll need to hold out longer than our previous assessments suggested was possible. The strategic situation was grim. Tharaki defensive technology was designed to delay rather than defeat military attacks. Their peaceful philosophy had led them to develop systems that could slow invasion forces but not stop them entirely. Colonel Chun studied the tactical displays with professional interest. Admiral, what's the composition of the hegemony forces? Standard conquest fleet, 6 heavy assault cruisers, 12 destroyer escorts, and approximately 5,000 ground assault troops, Admiral Corvin replied. Against conventional Tharaki defenses, our computers project complete planetary occupation within 72 hours. The assessment was sobering. 5,000 Sark warriors represented an overwhelming force against a peaceful agricultural world with no significant military infrastructure. Dr. Therenko contemplated the situation with a philosophical approach that had guided his species through previous crises. Perhaps this is the test that will determine whether our experiment with human training methods has practical value beyond personal development. How many trained Tharaki do we have available? Chun asked Dr. Vilama. Approximately 800 individuals have completed basic training, the scientist replied. However, they have no actual combat experience, and their training is focused on personal development rather than military application. The numbers were daunting. 800 trained but inexperienced Tharaki against 5,000 veteran Sark warriors represented odds that no conventional military analysis would consider survivable. Chun, however, was not thinking in conventional military terms. Dr. Therenko, are your people willing to defend their world using the capabilities they've developed through training? The philosopher considered the question carefully. Colonel, our people understand that freedom requires vigilance, and that peace must sometimes be defended through strength. If human training has given us the capability to protect our way of life, then we have a responsibility to use that capability. The commitment was remarkable considering the Thoraki's traditional pacifism. Human training hadn't made them more aggressive, but it had given them the confidence to take action when their values were threatened. Admiral Corvin, please transmit detailed intelligence about Sark military doctrine and capabilities, Chen requested. We'll need to understand exactly what we're facing. Colonel, surely you're not suggesting that 800 inexperienced Thoraki can hold off an entire Sark conquest fleet? Admiral Corvin's skepticism was evident in his tone. No, Admiral, Chen replied with a smile that her human colleagues would have recognized as dangerous. I'm suggesting that 800 determined beings who refuse to accept defeat can accomplish things that military computers can't calculate. The confidence in her voice was based on 2 years of experience watching supposedly peaceful species discover capabilities they never knew they possessed. Human training didn't create warriors. It revealed the warrior potential that existed within every sentient being willing to fight for something they valued. Over the following days, New Kepler transformed from a quiet agricultural world into something unprecedented in galactic history. A peaceful civilization preparing for war without abandoning its commitment to peace. The trained Thoraki organized themselves into defensive units, but their approach to military organization reflected their cultural values. Instead of rigid hierarchies based on rank and authority, they created flexible networks based on mutual support and shared responsibility. They didn't train to kill enemies. They trained to protect their families, preserve their culture, and defend their right to live according to their chosen values. The distinction was crucial and would prove decisive in the coming conflict. Human military advisors worked alongside Thoraki philosophers to develop strategies that utilized their species' strengths rather than attempting to transform them into something they weren't. The result was a defensive doctrine unlike anything in galactic military history. Dr. Theron Ko observed the preparations with growing amazement. Colonel Chun, I'm witnessing my people discover courage they never knew they possessed. Not the aggressive courage of traditional warriors, but the protective courage of beings defending something precious. That's the most powerful kind of courage, Chen replied. Beings who fight for conquest can be defeated through superior force. Beings who fight to protect what they love can only be defeated by destroying everything they're fighting for. The philosophical insight would prove prophetic. When the Sark conquest fleet arrived in the new Kepler system, they encountered resistance that defied every principle of conventional military science. The Thoraki didn't fight like traditional soldiers. They fought like an entire civilization that had collectively decided that some things were worth any sacrifice to preserve. The battle for New Kepler would become a turning point in galactic history, demonstrating that human training methods could transform not just individuals, but entire cultures, creating strength that went far beyond physical capability to encompass the power of unified will directed toward a just cause. The galaxy's strongest fighters were about to discover that strength itself was more than physical prowess or technological advantage. True strength came from beings who knew what they were fighting for and refused to accept that anything could prevent them from achieving it. The silence that would follow would be the silence of warriors realizing that they had been measuring strength by the wrong standards, and that the age of traditional military dominance was giving way to an age where determination could overcome any obstacle, including obstacles that seemed mathematically insurmountable. The Battle of New Kepler began at dawn on the third day after the Sark fleet achieved orbital position. Historical records would later describe it as the engagement that fundamentally altered galactic understanding of warfare. But for the 800 Thoraki defenders preparing to face 5,000 veteran warriors, it was simply the moment when philosophy would either prove itself in practice or be revealed as empty theory. General Vastar of the hegemony of Sark studied the planetary scans from his flagship's command center, his reptilian features twisted into an expression of contempt. The Sark had built their empire through overwhelming force applied against species too weak to resist effectively, and the intelligence reports suggested this conquest would follow the familiar pattern. Defensive positions, General, asked his aide-de-camp, Commander Siskvier. Minimal, Vastar replied, his voice carrying the arrogance of a leader who had never encountered serious resistance from peaceful species. Agricultural settlements converted to hasty fortifications, no significant military infrastructure, no heavy weapons detected. Standard population centers with civilian shelters. The assessment was accurate, but incomplete. The Sark sensors detected the physical preparations, but missed the psychological transformation that had occurred throughout Tharaki society. Their instruments could measure defensive structures, but not defensive determination. Estimated resistance duration. Kulmundes Siskba Inkidet. 18 to 24 hours. General Vastar responded confidently. The Tharaki have no military tradition, no warrior culture, no experience with organized violence. They'll surrender once they understand the futility of resistance. The prediction was based on centuries of successful conquests against peaceful civilizations. The Sark had developed their military doctrine specifically for overwhelming opponents who preferred negotiation to violence, and that doctrine had never failed to produce swift victory. What General Vastar didn't understand was that the Tharaki he was facing had been fundamentally changed by exposure to human philosophy. They were no longer the same species that had built their civilization around avoiding conflict. On the planet's surface, the Tharaki defensive preparations reflected an approach to warfare that no galactic military academy had ever studied. Instead of concentrating their forces in traditional defensive positions, they had distributed themselves throughout the terrain in small groups designed to support each other through overlapping fields of responsibility. Dr. Therenko stood in the command center established in the capital city's administrative complex, surrounded by Tharaki who had transformed from academics and farmers into something unprecedented in galactic history. Peaceful beings who had learned to fight without abandoning their commitment to peace. The Sark landing craft are approaching the surface, reported Dr. Vielenma, monitoring the sensor displays with the same careful attention she had previously devoted to agricultural research. Initial wave consists of approximately 1,000 warriors in armored assault vehicles. The numbers represented overwhelming force by any conventional calculation. 1,000 Sark warriors equipped with advanced military technology should have been sufficient to pacify the entire planet within hours. Dr. Therenko activated the communication network that connected all Tharaki defensive positions. My friends, the moment has arrived when we discover whether the strength we've developed serves the values we've always held. Remember that we fight not to destroy our enemies, but to preserve our way of life. The message reflected the philosophical approach that had guided Tharaki preparations. Human training had given them the capability to fight, but Tharaki wisdom determined how they would use that capability. The first engagement occurred at Landing Zone Alpha, where 50 Sark warriors in powered armor encountered a Tharaki defensive position that should have been overwhelmed within minutes. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The Tharaki didn't fight like conventional soldiers. They fought like a community defending its home, using terrain knowledge, coordinated support, and tactical flexibility that confused and frustrated their attackers. Sergeant Coles R.A., leading the Sark assault team, found himself pinned down by defensive fire that seemed to come from everywhere simultaneously. Command, we're encountering unexpected resistance at LZ Alpha. Requesting tactical support. Define unexpected resistance, responded General Vastar from orbit. Sir, the defenders appear to be using advanced small unit tactics. Their positions are mutually supporting, their fire discipline is excellent, and they're coordinating maneuvers that suggest professional military training. The report was disturbing because Sark intelligence had specifically confirmed that the Tharaki possessed no significant military capability. The presence of professional-level tactics suggested either massive intelligence failure or unprecedented transformation. Casualties, General Vastar demanded. 15% of the assault team neutralized, sir. We're making no progress toward our objectives. The casualty rate was shocking. Sark warriors were expected to overwhelm peaceful defenders with minimal losses. The fact that agricultural scientists were inflicting significant casualties on veteran soldiers defied everything the Sark understood about military reality. Similar reports began flooding in from landing zones across the planet. Everywhere the Sark forces encountered resistance, they found themselves facing opponents who fought with skill and determination that shouldn't have existed. What the Sark couldn't understand was that they weren't fighting traditional soldiers. They were fighting beings who had learned to view challenges as opportunities for growth, obstacles as tests of character, and hardship as the price of preserving something precious. The Tharaki defenders weren't trying to win in the conventional sense. They were trying to protect their families, preserve their culture, and demonstrate that peaceful beings could defend themselves without becoming what they opposed. Colonel Chun monitored the battle from her position in the Human Advisory Center, communicating with Tharaki commanders through the network that linked all defensive positions. What she observed was the practical application of human training philosophy under conditions that would test its validity completely. Dr. Theron Ko, your people are performing beyond our most optimistic projections, she reported. They're not just holding defensive positions, they're actively disrupting Sark tactical plans. They're fighting for something larger than themselves, Dr. Theron Ko replied. Human training taught them that they could transcend their limitations. Tharaki values taught them why they should. The combination was proving devastatingly effective. The Tharaki possessed all the capabilities that human training could develop, but they were motivated by convictions that ran deeper than any military doctrine. As the battle continued, the Sark forces found themselves facing a type of resistance they had never encountered. Traditional peaceful species either surrendered quickly or fought desperately until they were overwhelmed. The Tharaki didn't either. They fought intelligently, adapting their tactics to changing conditions. They fought persistently, maintaining resistance even when their positions became untenable. Most importantly, they fought cooperatively, supporting each other through challenges that would have broken individual resolve. General Vastar received increasingly disturbing reports throughout the day. Commander Siskvier explained to me how agricultural scientists are outfighting our elite assault troops. Sir, they appear to have received advanced military training from an unknown source. Their capabilities exceed our intelligence projections by several orders of magnitude. Unknown source. Vastar's voice carried dangerous undertones. Our reconnaissance was thorough. There are no significant military advisors present, no advanced training facilities, no indication of outside intervention. Nevertheless, sir, their performance suggests professional military conditioning. They're employing tactics that our own forces would find challenging to counter. The explanation failed to satisfy General Vastar, but the evidence was undeniable. The simple agricultural world was proving to be one of the most difficult conquests in Sark military history. By the end of the first day, the Sark forces had achieved none of their initial objectives. Instead of the anticipated swift victory, they found themselves engaged in a grinding campaign against defenders who seemed to become more effective as the fighting continued. The transformation was exactly what human training was designed to produce. The Tharaki weren't just enduring the hardships of combat. They were using those hardships to become stronger, more coordinated, and more determined. Dr. Vilama analyzed the day's combat reports with scientific precision. Colonel Chun, our defenders have sustained 12% casualties, but have inflicted 37% casualties on Sark forces. More significantly, morale indicators show that our people are actually gaining confidence as the battle progresses. The statistics defied conventional military wisdom. Defenders typically became demoralized as casualties mounted and their situation deteriorated. The Tharaki were showing the opposite pattern, drawing strength from their successful resistance. They're discovering that they're stronger than they believed possible, Chun observed. Combat is revealing capabilities they developed through training, but had never tested under extreme conditions. The second day of battle saw the Sark forces attempt to break Tharaki resistance through overwhelming firepower. Heavy weapons were deployed against defensive positions, aerial bombardment was initiated against suspected command centers, and assault tactics were intensified throughout the operational area. The Tharaki response was to adapt and overcome. Instead of being demoralized by escalated violence, they modified their tactics to counter new threats. When heavy weapons threatened their positions, they dispersed and regrouped. When aerial bombardment targeted their command centers, they switched to decentralized decision-making. Most importantly, they maintained their essential character throughout the escalation. They fought more effectively, but not more brutally. They inflicted casualties, but took no pleasure in causing suffering. They defended themselves without becoming their enemies. General Vastar found himself facing a situation unprecedented in Sark military history. Commander, our forces are being systematically outfought by agricultural scientists. Explain this to me in terms that make sense. Sir, I believe we're encountering the practical application of training methodologies that our intelligence services failed to detect. The Tharaki have been somehow transformed into effective military opponents without sacrificing their cultural identity. The assessment was accurate, but raised disturbing questions about the source of such transformation. The Sark had extensive intelligence networks throughout the galaxy, yet they had completely missed a development that had fundamentally altered the military capability of an entire species. What are you suggesting, Commander? Sir, I believe we're seeing the first practical demonstration of rumored human training techniques. Reports from across the galaxy have suggested that humans possess methods for enhancing combat effectiveness that don't rely on technology or genetic modification. General Vastar,